Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Picard Season 3 Episode 2, Disengage. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Picard, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for Picard up to Season 3 Episode 2. If you have not seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, I think I appreciate this one a little bit better than the first one. I'm starting to get more of a feel for the story, and there wasn't as many things that annoyed me in this episode that annoyed me in the first one. I still think I guess I'll start with the villain. I'm not sold on this villain. She seems like, I like Amanda Plummer as an actress, don't get me wrong. But it seems like just this stereotypical Star Trek movie villain, like the bad one, and like let's do Khan again. And in fact, the villain that this character reminds me of the most is Nero from the 2009 Star Trek. Now, if you know anything about how I feel about that movie, and Nero in particular, you know that is an extremely bad thing. To evoke that memory, because she has that same kind of I'm crazy feel to it. Like Nero was like, "Hi, how's it going? Can you beam your captain aboard? I'll destroy it." Gee, thanks. And then he'll start screaming for no reason. And it seemed like they were kind of going for the same thing, like here with this villain who was like, maniacally laughing, insanely giggling when, the Titan fired on them and ran away. She's like, oh, God, oh, God, follow them! I still got that, like, cliche, crazy person, mustache twirly, uninteresting, undeveloped villain vibes from her butt. And plus, all her minions look like they're going to an orgy from Eyes Wide Shut. But they're more bland and cliche than the Remans were in Nemesis. So that still doesn't sit well with me. But here's the thing. Nero was a terrible, terrible villain because he just remained cliche and empty, and he's trying to avenge his wife. They just gave him the same motivation as Khan. And they never developed him. And that's the difference here. There's 8 more episodes to go, so there is a chance they could develop her and make her more interesting, give her a backstory. But if they don't, if they just simply make Nero her and make it, she's just crazy, then she's going to be a terrible, terrible villain. And already I don't have a good feel about it. Like, my first introduction to her is like, this is just a cliche villain. Now, this episode though did make me a bit more interested in the plot. Like, I'm more engaged, which is ironic since the title of the episode is Disengage. I'm more engaged in finding out what's going on. Like, the mystery deepens about why is it that they're after Jack Crusher? Not even Jack Crusher knows why they're after him. And who is that Jack Crusher, getting into his backstory, how the Federation thinks he's a con artist. But the episode paints a picture of him being sort of a Doctors Without Border type who wants to heal people regardless of the political or bureaucratic implications. And so he had to break a few rules, bribe a few people, and the authorities can misinterpret him as being a con artist or swindling people when really he's trying to heal people. And that's the kind of picture we get from him, which is a very interesting character. And by implication, of course, is that Dr. Crusher was doing the same thing. It's just he was more of the face of it. And perhaps he's more sort of involved in that kind of swindling backwards deals. And so that would be a really interesting backstory for Crusher. That's what she's been doing for 20 years. So I'm with it. I'm really interested in that. It also deepens the mystery with Raffi's storyline. It's funny because Raffi was definitely my least favorite character of Picard, and it's the only character that they kept. Like, I actually didn't mind Elnor, and Rios was okay. I don't know. Rios kind of annoyed me though. With the cigar smoking, but then again they had the villain smoking cigar. I like the way she like slid around her chair and flipped around just smoking cigars. It's so cheesy. But anyway, I'm already talked about her. I'm talking about Raffi now. So yeah, so she was my least favorite character. I really didn't like her in the first two seasons, especially the first one, and she's the only one they kept, and I still don't like that storyline with her being a drug addict. I'm sorry. I know it's plausible that there would be drug addicts in the 25th century with all these different alien cultures and backwards cultures and underground stuff going on, but I don't know. I just doesn't sit well with me that one of our main characters are focusing on that, which they bring up again with the son who refuses to talk to her. That storyline felt a bit contrived to me, but I will say I'm actually digging her storyline overall this season. Even though she was my least favorite character, I was kind of disappointed that the only character they kept out of all the new characters from Picard was the one I liked the least. But I like what they're doing with her. Their whole conspiracy storyline trying to uncover, and that mysterious handler, who everyone guessed was Worf, by the way. And the way that she was talking to this mysterious handler, and the handler is saying disengage, don't pursue it further, but she just had to. It actually does kind of make sense because recovering addicts do tend to have that sort of addiction mentality when it comes to other things, such as, their job and like a mission or something that they have to accomplish, that one track mind where I have to fix this. And of course, in this case, it's about saving millions and millions of lives. So you see it as an extremely good thing, although they also portray it as personally unhealthy for her. The fact that she had to choose that over her life with her son. But then again, as I said, that storyline did feel a bit contrived, like they had to contrive it where she had to choose that over her son, but whatever. But I do like it. It is interesting. And then the whole scene with the Shreen, I think his name, the Ferengi, it was a really good portrayal. I like how they used Ferengi as a typical gangster. I was on board with that. I liked the whole scene. That whole thing worked for me, and how she was like forcing her to take drugs as a loyalty test, but really he just wanted her. He already decided he was going to kill her. He just wanted to disable her to make it easier to kill her. But I got a question though. Does this Ferengi guy just happen to keep heads of people just lying around his lair? Won't they smell? I mean, maybe there's 25th century technology to stop it from smelling. Well, why does he just keep, this Romulan dude's head just lying around his office? I don't know. That seemed a bit strange. I was like, oh, well, I know you don't work for whatever his name is because here's his head. I'm like, so you just had that there like the whole time? But no, it is interesting that they were pinning it on this Romulan terrorist but Raffi saw right through that and knew that was a cover. I'm willing to guess that Worf knew it was cover as well, that he didn't buy, because he never specifically said. He's just like, oh, the Federation already found them, just disengage. He just didn't, for whatever reason, which we'll find out, I'm sure, he just didn't want Raffi investigating further. But I think he knew full well that this was just a cover story and bullshit. Now, logic dictates from we're watching a TV show, from a writing perspective, that this storyline will tie into the other storyline with Picard and Jack Crusher and all them. So the logical deduction to make here is that Amanda Plummer's character is the one responsible for destroying the Federation building, or somehow connected to it. And these stolen weapons, and so that's, you gotta figure that those two storylines are gonna merge at some point, and that would be the converging thread. It seems most likely. But again, so I'm intrigued. I'm interested to see where they go with this, but I haven't made any judgment. It depends. It depends on what they do with this, whether it would be good or bad. But for the moment, I'm engaged. And by the way, I do like how when Amanda Plummer asked Picard what his response was when the time ran up, his response was engaged. Okay, that was cool. As a Trekkie, I did appreciate that. And of course, it goes along with the name of the episode, Disengage. So, it's cool. I'm getting some cool vibes from all that so far. Now, let's talk about the Jack Crusher of it all. So, my favorite part of the whole episode was Riker. I loved Riker and how he was reacting to this. I loved the way they play that, and Jonathan Frakes, of course, did a great job. It felt so Riker-like, and he was like, "Are we not going to talk about what's the obvious thing?" And Picard mentioned something. He's like, "No, that's not what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying." And I like that he didn't actually say it, because the audience, of course, had already made that leap. A lot of people were talking about it since last week's episode. Well, this is probably Picard's son. And so they didn't need to say it in the script, and I like that they didn't. But I love Riker's reactions. You see what I'm saying here, don't you? I don't know why Riker sounds like Norm Macdonald all of a sudden. You see what I'm saying here? But anyway, yeah, and I like how they did that, and they didn't actually mention it until the very end of where they bring out Crusher, and she just looks at him, and Picard knows, and so he's like, he's my son, and he's immediately like, no, disable the transporters, fuck this shit, we're not giving up my son. Now, also, this makes sense because we know they're emulating the Star Trek movies, and as a lot of people brought up before, this is very reminiscent, is the polite way of saying it. I won't get into the impolite way of saying it. Reminiscent of the storyline from The Wrath of Khan, where Kirk discovers he has a son who's already grown up. They're doing it again with, and I would buy that. Now, they didn't other than just Crusher looking at Picard, they didn't outright state it was Picard's son. So I was still when he said his name was Jack Crusher, I thought of the theories that Beverly somehow used genetic material to Jurassic Park, Jack Crusher back to life or something like that. I thought, well, maybe that's it, or a clone of him or something. But watching the Ready Room with Will Wheaton, they're talking like this is Picard's son, in fact. Now, this could be a misdirect still, and they might be talking that way because they don't want to give away what's coming. But I think it would be cool. As I said, I heard about this before the show started, and I had my reservations about this idea. But actually, I think it would be really interesting. And one thing, actually, as someone who liked Next Generation and this character Picard, one thing and I noticed this a lot when I was watching the first two seasons of Picard, one thing that really disappointed me was the fact that Picard has no heir and no one to continue the line. So the fact that he would have a son, I think, is a very interesting concept. Now, if they kill him off unceremoniously in a couple episodes like they did with David from the Star Trek movies, then I'll be pissed off, because what's the fucking point? But hopefully they won't do that. And hopefully it is. Well, I'm not saying it has to be Picard's son. Maybe if they misdirect and it's not, I'd be fine with that too. But I'll also be fine with it being Picard's son. I actually think that's an interesting concept. Because, yeah, they could explore the kind of relationship Picard and Beverly had after Nemesis, because we don't know. That whole area was a blank. And in All Good Things, of course, Beverly and Picard were married at one point. I mean, they were exes by the time that episode was taking place, but yeah, so it lines up. And apparently, I love hearing about all the Easter eggs. Apparently they even had like Mingatu horns in that Ferengi guy's lair to reference Lower Decks, where the Ferengi were hunting the Mingatu horns. It was interesting. And apparently, and I didn't catch this, LaForge's daughters are the same names that the daughters that he says his daughters were in All Good Things. I wonder if they're going to mention who the mother is, because in All Good Things it was Leah Brahms, which hopefully that wouldn't be the case, because that's a bit problematic for other reasons I won't get into. But I don't know. Maybe they'll just avoid it and not say it, which I want them to say. I want to find out. I want to know. I want to know. But yeah, I liked the whole Mystery of Jack Crusher, and the whole episode was essentially a countdown, like, oh, this ship's about to destroy them, and how people deal with this oncoming threat. And so I think it worked in that regard. And I actually liked Captain Shaw a bit better in this episode. He, as I said, it annoyed the fuck out of me. The way he was reacting to Picard and Riker coming on board, it felt dumb. Here, they toned it down a bit, and I think his reaction to 709 is natural. Like, you disobeyed my orders, you're relieved of duty. That makes total sense. And the way he's reacting is like, why am I gonna, risk 500 lives just to say these two people who got themselves into trouble when I wanted them not to? So obviously, I disagree with him, but I'm not as bothered by his character. He's becoming more of the... And he does make some decisions. Like, he did decide to save Picard at the last second, and when Picard made the choice to, like, override him. I love how Picard pulled rank, by the way. It's like, Admiral, you will follow my orders. The Admiral is commanding you. Now, Shaw could have very well... I guess it was too late, but Shaw could have done what they did to Commodore Decker in the Doomsday Machine, which I just watched, and been like, well, fuck that. I don't care if you outrank me. You're relieved, and don't follow his commands, and I'll let Starfleet deal with the consequences later. But as I said, he didn't really have time to, and it did seem that the crew was a bit more loyal to Picard as well, and his reputation preceded him. Besides, Picard wasn't actively, trying to get the ship destroyed like Commodore Decker was, or maybe he kind of is, but anyway, in a different sense. He's not completely, obviously not fit to be in command the way Decker was. Let me put it that way. But anyway, yeah, so that was cool. I'm more interested in the show now, but again, reserved to see how it goes. Pretty much. I was looking into how many people were being negative on this show, because I was really negative on it last week, and it's not very many. There's a list of several other YouTubers I watch. The majority of them, even the New Trek haters who rail against anything that's been made after 2009, even those people liked Picard. But and this is something Patreon supporter, I believe it was Norman Buckwald, pointed out to me, is that the commonality of myself and the other people who are being negative on Picard is that we haven't previewed the first 6 episodes. Most of the people who have previewed the first 6 episodes, including these New Trek haters who hate everything new Star Trek, who they like it. So that does make me feel more optimistic that the show will get better, and that the future episodes will justify and make it and not completely throw everything away and re-justify all this stuff that I'm seeing now that I'm interested in. And everyone involved in the show kept saying that. It's like, the season's going to be so good. But again, they always say that shit. They said that with Picard season 2. I have hope, but again, I'm still skeptical. I still could end up, because At the moment, I don't like this villain, Amanda Plummer's character. Like, they really have to do something to justify it. And even if they do, I still feel like the Eyes Wide Shut orgy masks here. I don't know, the whole aesthetics around her is, it just feels a bit too cliche, like stuff that they're trying too hard to be like Khan, and that's what something Terry Matalas said in one of his interviews. Is like, well, any great Star Trek property needs a good villain, which I actually disagree with that. I think some of the best Star Trek installments don't have any villains, like Star Trek 4. By the way, didn't have a villain. The Inner Light didn't have a villain. And I guess in the Pale Moonlight kind of really didn't have a villain. Like, you could say Senator Vreenak was the villain, or the Dominion was the villain, but they're always the villains. But really the villain out of that episode was Sisko himself, or Garrick was the villain. Like, and that kind of dynamic. So I disagreed by having a one-off villain. I'm gonna get you. I actually wish Star Trek would move away from that, and so this is probably the aspect of this season I'm most skeptical about. But we'll see. And also, as another Patreon supporter, Brandon Neal Howes, pointed out, it was actually on my sister's live stream, that the ship that she has reminds me a lot of the ship from Nemesis, the Scimitar, and they also try to make it badass and how it growls all the time. I think it's cheesy. So I'm most skeptical about that part. The more character aspects, like the stuff with Jack Crusher and Riker and Picard and Raffi, like the more character aspects is what I'm more interested in, is what is working for me. So we will see. So my rating for Disengage out of 10, I guess I'll give it a 7. I was thinking 6 through most of the review, but I think it's good enough to give a 7. Very good. But again, it's kind of dependent on what comes next. The score could go higher or lower depending on what they do next, but I'm going to give this a 7. Very good. So that's it for my review of Star Trek Picard. I shall be back next week, of course, to cover episode 3. And you can check out my channel as I'm covering Star Trek the original series, episode by episode at the moment, and do many more videos on Star Trek and many other shows and whatnot. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.